If the municipal water grid running under your street were to, completely fail today, you are exactly 72 hours away from a total survival crisis.
Yeah, it's a grim thought.
Right. But that is the stark, really terrifying reality sitting at the very top of the stack of sources we are looking at today. And according to these documents, that clock isn't just a hypothetical scenario, it is actually already ticking.
It is an incredibly aggressive way to look at our infrastructure, for
Right.
sure. But I mean, it immediately reorients how you view the water coming out of your kitchen faucet.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we operate on this invisible contract,
Yeah.
we just assume the system beneath our feet is solid, that someone else is handling the hard work of keeping us hydrated and safe.
But the documents we're analyzing in today's deep dive suggest that invisible contract is completely shattered. They paint a picture of a municipal landscape that is actively collapsing.
Actively collapsing, yes.
And what we are going to do today is challenge everything you think you know about the water flowing into your home right now. And, well, more importantly, explore the radical DIY solution presented in these materials to bypass that entire centralized system.
Right. It is a profound shift from relying on public utilities to engineering your own independence.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're acting as your guides through some incredibly dramatic claims from our source stack. Now, to be absolutely clear right up front, we aren't here to endorse these views or take sides.
From that, we're just looking at the material.
Exactly. We're just impartially exploring the assertions made in these documents. And the main assertion is that billion-dollar utility companies are hiding a dark secret, essentially operating a failing grid and deliberately keeping you trapped as a permanent paying dependent.
It is a highly provocative premise. The sources argue that we have reached a point where water distribution has become, like, the ultimate form of centralized control.
And their answer to this control is wild. They are claiming that you can completely bypass this system with a $50 DIY box that pulls 40 gallons of water straight out of thin air.
Which sounds completely like science fiction.
It really does. And we are going to walk you through exactly how they claim this works, the thermodynamics behind it, and how they say you can build it. But before we get into the futuristic atmospheric technology, we really have to look at why these sources insist the tap water you currently take for granted is fundamentally compromised.
Yeah, we need to establish the root of the crisis.
Yeah.
Because without understanding the failure of the current system, the radical nature of their solution just doesn't fully land.
Right.
The sources take a very analytical approach here. They use the phrase peeling back the layers, pointing to the physical reality of the municipal water grid.
Yeah.
And the data they present regarding its structural integrity is staggering.
So let's talk about that physical reality, because when I turn on the tap, I just see water. What are we actually looking at beneath the street?
What's fascinating here is the sheer, unbelievable age of the infrastructure. The municipal pipes delivering water to millions of homes are over 160 years old in many areas.
Wait, 160 years?
Yeah.
That means we are relying on infrastructure laid down during the Civil War era to support modern metropolitan populations. I mean, that alone is difficult to wrap your head around.
It is, and that extreme age brings physical consequences.
Yeah.
The sources point out that this grid was obviously never designed for our current population density or our modern industrial output.
Obviously not.
So because of this overuse and just the passage of time, these pipes are structurally failing. They are corroding from the inside out. But it's not just simple decay, The sources highlight the chemical reality of how modern water treatment interacts with these ancient pipes.
Right, because for a long time, those lead pipes had a calcified scale built up on the inside, right? Which essentially acted as a protective barrier between the raw lead and the water flowing through it.
That is the critical mechanism, yes. But as municipalities change their water treatment chemicals to cut costs or, fail to properly balance the corrosion inhibitors, that protective scale is stripped away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Suddenly, the highly corrosive treated water is flowing directly against bare 160-year-old lead. And as that physical breakdown happens, they are leaching heavy metals, specifically lead as well as fluoride, directly into your drinking glass.
So the water treatment meant to keep us safe is actually interacting with the ancient infrastructure to poison the supply.
According to the documents, yes.
But surely the utility companies know this. I mean, if the pipes are rotting and leaching lead, fixing a nationwide network of underground plumbing has to be on their radar.
It is, but fixing it requires capital that just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
The utility companies are facing billions of dollars in repair costs just to patch this failing system, let alone replace it. But And what's fascinating here is the critical financial mechanism the sources highlight.
Right.
The companies do not absorb that debt. They pass every single penny of those repair costs down to the consumer through rate hikes.
Which results in these insane bills. The sources mention specific cases of a 3,000% increase in water bills.
It's massive.
I mean, if we think about the underlying logic here, it's essentially like renting an apartment from a terrible landlord. You are paying skyrocketing rent, your monthly water bills, for a building that is actively collapsing around you.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. The roof leaks, the floors are rotting, the pipes are literally poisoning you, but the landlord keeps doubling your rent to pay for the duct tape holding it together.
That landlord analogy perfectly encapsulates the economic trap being described in the documents. The sources define this specific state as being at point A, a state of total dependency.
Point A.
Yeah. You are effectively a perpetual tenant to a failing system. You aren't just paying for the water you consume, you are subsidizing the debt of a crumbling 160-year-old grid.
A tenant to the utility company. It's a completely passive position to be in. And going back to that detail from the very beginning, the 3-day survival clock.
Right.
If you are entirely dependent on this fragile, decaying network, and those rotting pipes finally suffer a catastrophic failure, your buffer between normalcy and a survival crisis is practically non-existent.
72 hours. That is the true vulnerability of being a consumer in a highly centralized aging system. Your survival is entirely out of your hands.
So, if the municipal tap is a toxic, overpriced trap, it is completely logical that any sane person would start looking for alternatives. You want out of the tenant arrangement. But the sources argue that our most common go-to solutions are actually dangerous traps themselves.
Exactly. The immediate reflex for most people when a boil water advisory hits, or when they generally just distrust their tap water, is to rush to the grocery store and buy bottled water.
Yeah, that's what everyone does.
But the sources are highly critical of this reflex. They categorize the bottled water industry as a massive scam, carrying a 3,000% markup.
And the irony they point out is that a huge percentage of bottled water is literally just sourced from another municipal tap somewhere else.
Yeah, it's incredible.
You're paying a premium for the exact same aging infrastructure, just packaged differently.
And packaging is where the biological cost comes in. The sources emphasize that by relying on bottled water, you are constantly ingesting microplastics. These plastics leach from the bottles while they sit in hot warehouses and on store shelves. So you are trading heavy metals for endocrine-disrupting microplastics while paying a massive premium for the privilege.
Okay, so bottled water is basically an expensive plastic delivery system. But if I'm caught in a situation where the tap is questionable and I don't want to buy plastic bottles, my immediate historical thought is I'll just boil it.
Right.
You put a pot on the stove, you boil the water, kill the bacteria, you're safe.
It is the most common assumption, deeply ingrained in us. But the sources explicitly call this a dangerous myth when we were talking about chemical and heavy metal contamination, which is the primary threat from these aging pipes.
Wait, boiling doesn't work.
We have to look at the physical chemistry of boiling. When you boil water, the H2O vaporizes at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. It turns into steam and leaves the pot.
Okay, sure.
But heavy metals, like the lead from those 160-year-old pipes and chemical additives like fluoride, have significantly higher boiling points. Lead doesn't boil until over 3,000 degrees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they do not evaporate on your kitchen stove.
Oh, I see where this is going. If the water is leaving as steam, but the lead is staying in the pot.
Precisely. As the water turns to steam and leaves the pot, the overall volume of liquid decreases, but the amount of heavy metals remains exactly the same.
Yikes.
Therefore, the concentration of those heavy metals in the remaining water actually increases. The poison, as the sources put it, stays behind.
Wow. So it's exactly like reducing a sauce on the stove to intensify the flavor, but instead of flavor, you're just intensifying the poison.
That is exactly the mechanism. You are cooking off the clean water and leaving a denser, more dangerous concentration of toxins.
You are literally making the water more toxic the longer you boil it. That completely flips conventional wisdom on its head.
It really does.
So let's look at where we stand. The ground-level municipal tap is a rotting trap. The store-bought bottle is a microplastic scam, and boiling just turns your cooking pot into a concentrated lead soup. We are essentially out of ground-level options.
Which is the exact logical failure point the sources want the reader to reach. Once you realize the ground-level infrastructure is unsalvageable, The only way out is to start looking down at the dirt and start looking up at the atmosphere.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The sources introduce this core innovation they call niche bending. Now, looking at the context, it sounds like they aren't inventing brand new, never-before-seen technology.
Not at all.
The term bending implies taking existing, highly complex industrial atmospheric technology and bending it down into a highly accessible, simplified consumer format. Is that what allows this to be a DIY project?
That is an excellent way to synthesize it. Nichebending is about taking industrial-grade self-sufficiency and democratizing it. The goal is to bypass the ground-level grid entirely by tapping into a completely different reservoir.
Let's talk about the science of this air water, because the claims here are massive.
The science relies on fundamental thermodynamics, but applied with incredible efficiency. The sources explain that the atmosphere around us is a massive, untapped reservoir. Even in environments with only 10% desert humidity, the ambient air contains billions of tons of moisture at any given moment.
Billions of tons, even in a desert climate.
Yes. The device the sources focus on is called the smart water box. It's engineered to tap into that atmospheric reservoir.
Okay, how does it do that?
It utilizes basic thermodynamics, very similar to how a cold glass of iced tea sweats on a hot summer day.
Oh, condensation.
Exactly. But instead of relying on a massive, expensive industrial compressor to cool the air, the DIY blueprint utilizes repurposed low-wattage components to drop the temperature inside the unit, forcing the ambient water vapor to condense back into a liquid state.
And the sources make a massive, almost unbelievable claim here regarding the output. They assert that this $50 DIY rig can extract 40 gallons of pure water every single day.
Yep.
40 gallons from a $50 box.
It is a radical engineering claim, but it is the absolute cornerstone of their niche-bending philosophy. And we need to emphasize why this specific source of water matters so much in the context of our failing pipes.
Right.
Unlike groundwater, which has to travel through layers of potentially contaminated soil, agricultural runoff, and those 160-year-old lead pipes, this air water has never touched the ground.
It's essentially born in the air and caught directly in the box.
Because it is formed through atmospheric condensation, it is naturally distilled. The evaporation process happens naturally in the environment, leaving contaminants behind on the Earth. Right.
Yeah.
The atmosphere holds the pure H2O vapor, and the device simply condenses it back into a usable form.
It's like building a personal sci-fi moisture evaporator right in your backyard, like something straight out of a movie on a desert planet.
Yeah, very much so.
But the absolute kicker for me is the accessibility. They emphasize that this isn't some $2,000 piece of specialized equipment that you have to order from a tech firm. It uses what they call a Lego-style blueprint and parts you can literally just grab off the shelf at a local hardware store.
That accessibility is exactly why they claim it threatens the centralized utility model.
But I have to push back a little on the DIY aspect.
Okay, sure.
A DIY water generator sounds incredibly intimidating to the average person. If I'm being honest, a lot of people struggle to assemble flat-pack furniture with the instructions right in front of them.
Fair point.
So the idea of building a thermodynamics machine that pulls drinking water out of thin air, that seems like a massive leap for someone without an engineering background. Let's talk about the practical reality of actually building and running this thing.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, what the sources are really advocating for is a total paradigm shift in how we view our capabilities. This smart water box is described in the documents not just as a survival hack, but as a financial escape hatch.
A financial escape hatch?
Yeah, it is the physical tool that shifts a person from being a dependent, passive consumer, that tenant paying a 3,000% markup for lead-laced water, into an empowered, self-sufficient producer.
Okay, but does the hardware actually work in the real world outside of the theoretical blueprints?
The sources lean heavily into what they call radical transparency to prove it does. They provide extensive proof of real-world application. For instance, they document users of this smart water box who have sent their generated air water to professional, independent laboratories for testing against standard municipal and bottled sources.
Oh, really? And what were the lab results?
The independent lab results prove that this naturally distilled air water was actually significantly cleaner than premium bottled water brands.
Really?
Yes. It lacked the microplastics, it lacked the chemical treatment residue, and it obviously lacked the heavy metals.
Cleaner than the expensive stuff you buy at the grocery store. That is a compelling argument for the purity of atmospheric condensation. But what about the build process?
Yeah.
Is it really as foolproof as they claim?
To address that exact skepticism, they cite a very specific case study in the materials. A mother with absolutely zero technical skills, no engineering background, and no specialized tools was able to finish building her own functioning smart water box in a single afternoon, strictly by following the provided step-by-step video guide.
So what does this all mean? For you, the person listening right now, balancing these dramatic claims against your everyday life, according to these sources, it means that the barrier to absolute water independence is shockingly low.
Shockingly low, yes.
If a non-engineer can build it in an afternoon for $50, the dependency on the 160-year-old grid is entirely voluntary. And they highlight some incredibly empowering details about the operational costs of running this machine.
Which is key.
Right, because it utilizes niche bending, those low wattage components, rather than heavy industrial compressors. It uses less energy than a standard kitchen toaster.
And that low energy requirement is the linchpin of true off-grid independence. Because it requires so little power, you can run the entire system off a single basic solar panel,
Wow.
which means it functions perfectly during grid failures or rolling blackouts. If the power grid goes down, your water supply does not.
You completely sever the cord, and financially, the return on investment is immediate. Because it costs so little to build from hardware store parts and operates essentially for free on solar power, the sources state that the box pays for itself in just a few months of saved utility bills.
Exactly.
You stop paying the terrible landlord, and you permanently own your own supply.
It fundamentally changes the economic relationship you have with your essential resources.
And it is worth noting how heavily the sources market this concept of total independence. They don't just provide the blueprint for the water box, they currently bundle it with an off-grid power guide, so you can learn exactly how to set up that solar panel and what they call a survival seed bank secret.
Right, the holistic approach.
Yeah, they are pitching this as a holistic ecosystem for total self-reliance. They are really pushing the idea that 40 gallons a day isn't just enough for drinking and cooking. It's enough to water a survival garden and sever ties with the centralized system completely.
This raises an important question, one that sits at the very heart of these source materials and challenges our everyday assumptions. How much control do we unknowingly hand over to centralized utility grids every single day?
A lot, usually.
When we trust an aging system without verifying its structural integrity, we place our fundamental survival in the hands of entities that, as the sources passionately argue, view us strictly as revenue streams subsidizing their massive debt, rather than as lives to protect.
It's a massive shift in perspective. Taking back that independence, stepping out of that point A dependency where you are just a tenant waiting for the pipes to fail. It starts with information. It starts with seeing the system for the fragile, decaying network it really is.
I agree.
The sources strongly encourage taking action before the grid inevitably snaps, urging you to check the links for the official Smart Water Box blueprint to see how this niche-bending technology actually goes together and to see if that holistic bundle with the power guide and seed bank is still available.
The overarching message they want to leave you with is clear the technology to own your supply, to become a producer rather than a consumer, exists today, and it is accessible to anyone willing to build it.
Exactly. It's about taking the theoretical concept of water freedom and making it a physical reality in your backyard. But as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought that really spun out for me after synthesizing all these sources.
Is there?
Something for you to chew on long after this is over. We've spent this entire time talking about the vulnerability of our water infrastructure. But if an individual with zero technical skills can suddenly pull their most essential survival resource out of thin air using a $50 box built in an afternoon,
Yeah.
well, what other massive centralized systems are we blindly dependent on right now? Think about our incredibly fragile global food supply chains. Think about the sprawling, exposed electrical grid.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. If water, the most vital resource on Earth, can be decentralized this easily through simple niche bending, what ancient failing system is going to be bypassed next?
That is a fascinating thread to pull as we look toward the future of self-reliance.
Keep questioning the systems around you. Until next time.